weeks being with us throughout all of this. And I really do appreciate all that you have done, all the time that you have taken. Dominique is not able to be with us today, but as I told Ginger, who is with us today, that Dominique has been unbelievably helpful. She has been tremendous working with, and Ginger Leach is with us today, and Ginger is going to be with us. Ginger, is there anything you would like to say to the group?
I'm just excited to be here to help you guys. And if you have any questions throughout, I'll be happy to help. But otherwise, I'll just take recommendations as we go through. And I may stop you for some clarifications as we move along. But just let me know if you need me, and I'm happy to meet you guys.
Thank you, Ginger. We will be respectful of your time. And I will start with the statement that we are instructed to read before every meeting, and that the Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in the new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. So that is the statement. And this will be the last time, my friends, you will have to hear me go through this on and on for you. Our topic today is policy considerations. The whole meeting will be dedicated, as we mentioned last week, to discuss and provide feedback on policies you would like to see in a draft formula. And you have before you, I think we have already sent this out, policy ideas in several areas, from economic disadvantage, concentration of poverty, scarcity, salaries, and on and on. And this is one where there's no doubt we will have to depend on our friends in the education space, our friends in the not-for-profit space, as we look at making recommendations on the various policy areas. Are there any, if you had to lay out the 3, 4, 5, or the 4, 5, 6 policy areas you would really like to tackle, would someone give me an idea so Ginger and I can make note of those? What would be those major policy areas? Do all of you have those before you?
Yes.
Okay, good. Take a look at those and see which the ones that, because you have, I think it's about 15 or 16, the areas that we need to make sure we highlight as we spend our hour going through this.
Cato, this is Chris Ensign, and I'll just, I guess, repeat what I've maybe said in at least a couple of other meetings regarding the first policy idea of the definition of economically disadvantaged. I know the fact that using the current policy of direct certification does not include all students that would qualify for the economically disadvantaged, because students that don't participate in the benefit program through direct certification, or their families don't participate, they are not captured in that economically disadvantaged subgroup. And so, I know I've expressed that a couple of times, as well as some of my other colleagues, that this just does not capture all of the economically disadvantaged students because either they or their families aren't able to access those benefits through direct certification.
Okay. Ginger, were you able to gather from what Chris said, several comments you can make in that area? Would you like for him to bullet point to 2 or 3 things that you would like to have that you can document?
Yes, I have. What I've documented is that using the direct certification does not capture all economically disadvantaged students. Clarifying question for you, Chris, would be, do you have a recommendation for what we should use instead of the direct certification?
Not necessarily, except I will say that I know that Title I status uses a multiplier to capture all economically disadvantaged students, or that's the intent, that may not be captured by other means. I believe it's a 1.6 multiplier. And so utilizing, some kind of multiplier might be one way to look at it, particularly since that's, what the U.S. Department of Education uses to identify Title I. So that could be one way, but I don't have any other great response. Maybe someone else does. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else like to weigh in on that particular area? Chris, I think we're all in agreement with you. You have articulated that before in our meetings, and I don't think we have any disagreement with you on that. Is there anyone else who would like to offer any suggestions on the definition of economically disadvantaged? Okay, dokie.
I guess, Kata, I'm
please.
sorry,
No,
Cardell. I'm not exactly sure of the full definition on the direct certification piece, but I think that there are some, and this might be getting to what Chris says as well, like some of our residents who might not be eligible for some of those things. And then I guess one of the questions would be, is it a full broad identification of not just whether they're receiving those resources, but whether they qualify for them. I know David's working on some of this stuff, so he might know better than me. But it's kind of like if folks time out of their support, out of their 5 years for TANF, are they on the list to be direct certified or not, because they're not receiving resources, even though they could qualify for resources. We just don't have laws that allow them to receive them. So I don't know if that is addressed at all.
That's a great point, because if they're 5 years out of TANF, then they're not receiving the benefit anymore, but they still could be economically disadvantaged.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I think that's a great point. So it's not tied to a benefit structure, but tied to the reality of the life experience. Yeah.
Great point. Okay. What about along those same lines? What about definition of concentration of poverty?
I hate to monopolize, but I'll jump in since no one else is. Currently attending a Title I school, that could make some sense. The issue there would be school districts have the discretion of identifying Title I schools. They must identify a Title I school if their student population is at least 75% economically disadvantaged. But a district has the discretion of moving that down all the way to if a school has 40% of their students economically disadvantaged. And so since the districts have that discretion, there could be differences in identifying Title I schools among differences throughout the state based upon what school districts are utilizing as the floor or the threshold to identify Title I schools. So that would be one thing I would want to point out.
Okay. Any other comments, clarifications, or areas?
Hey guys, this is Ramesh. I just wanted to make sure y'all knew I
Yes,
was
Ramesh.
on. I couldn't get on with the link, but I called in. My link wasn't
Yeah,
working
same
for some
thing.
reason. Okay.
Man, I have the same problem.
I see. Okay.
Max, thank you for joining us. Anyone
can't
else?
remember.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can't remember if this is under weights or I think this is under weights. So I guess the question would be how you weight, what's weighted more? Is it the percentage of students of to Chris's point of how much of the school qualifies for it to be a Title I school, or what becomes that? If you added in other factors potentially of what either is the concentration of actual poverty within the community where that school is, or where those students come from, not by specifically where the students who are attending it, or we've mentioned here before, and I'm still not sure if it gets included or not, is the mobility and transience of students. So I think that at least I think in the Shelby County Schools formula, it seems like one of the pieces that they've used to recognize poverty is like transience or mobility. So if you added in additional factors for concentrations of poverty, you might be able to get more of a, I guess, delineation or continuum of how to specify what the weight is or what it should be between schools or different areas.
Well, that's a good point, because didn't we talk about in this committee about even within areas where poverty is high, you have some areas more so than others, i.e., if you in Memphis and Shelby County, Smoky City may look different than Badwater or Scutterfield. And we talked about that if you just use the overall area, you still may be missing it. So, Ginger, what do you need, along with what Chris and Cordell just said, to what they articulated as far as notes to put in this particular area on the definition of concentration of poverty?
So what I have captured so far is overall just that concern that with districts having some discretion in this, it would create variability across the state, across districts and across the state. As follow-up to that, I think it would be that conversation about the transiency, how you all would like that part captured and shared over.
What would be some language you would be very comfortable with that Ginger could put into this document as relates to transient? Anybody
I know
think
enough to
some
be
language?
dangerous, so I'm gonna turn that over to Chris or Angela if they want to answer.
Yeah, I think what Cardell is saying is to include in that definition something relating to transiency or student mobility, because that's typically a sign, of poverty, a concentration of poverty. When the rent comes due, got to move to a relative's home or things of that nature. And so maybe including as part of the concentration of poverty definition, not just attending a Title I school, but also, taking into consideration student mobility as well. Is that
I would say student mobility and maybe housing insecurity as well.
But
housing insecurity. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, this is Angela. So I was thinking, definitely I agree, but I was also thinking about, when I think about transit, when I think about Title I schools, a population that we also leave out, because now we have direct certification, really for students who really would qualify for free and reduced lunch, right? Because sometimes I think that even though I may attend another school, even though I may not attend a Title I school, I still could be living in an area where I am still living with someone, because that's what happens. So many of our parents live with their parents who live in stable neighborhoods who may not be a Title I school. So we miss out. So, but if people who are truly qualified for free and reduced lunch, even if we don't get them under our direct certification, we would capture them there. And that would be another place where students can be served through mobility and through being transit. That was just something I wanted to add.
No, Angela, I appreciate it.
Cardell. That's dangerous, to be real dangerous with some information.
Angela, I appreciate you doing.
This is Tyler. Jumping on the kind of the reality perspective that Chris kind of brought up, is I know the University of Tennessee has done some a pretty extensive research study and put out something called the Ability to Pay Index. And I don't know if you all have ever looked at that, but it's at a county level, and it's for all 95 counties, and it's current data. And it does, I think there are 8 or 9 factors that it considers in that index. It may be worth having that as a consideration, or including that, because I don't know how much granular data the college actually has. I know they presented it at a county level, but when you're looking at what sort of formula to create and how to weight these things, that could be a good place to start.
Background information. Okay.
Cato, this is David Jordan with Agape. And so just to join in, asking about the definition of poverty in Cardell, I'm more dangerous than you are. So I'm way out in terms of, and this already may be in the formula, but often poverty obviously is thought about at an economic level. That's appropriate, but that's not completely inclusive. And so I think when we talk about attendance underneath that, as we said, around housing and insecurities and instabilities there, I think about mental health and ACEs, so adverse experiences and trauma, the safety in neighborhoods. And so there are ranges of ways to, I think about that's very appropriate, that part of the definition of poverty that is directly negatively impacting often education, attainment, and outcomes, and the supports that go into it. So I would argue for a little broader definition as we're talking about.
It's what you just mentioned in child's welfare and child's health care. We use ACEs a great deal. It is one of the hallmarks. So why don't we look at Ginger and putting pen to paper on this? I think the overarching is looking at the broader definition and including X, Y, and Z, the broader definition of concentration of poverty. And when you do your notes and get it back, we can look at it again. But I think we've covered several major areas that we've discussed over the last several weeks when we talked about the concentration of poverty. And especially if this is going to be one of the areas that will be recommended for funding. So is there anything else that we've missed in this area? And Angela, there's no doubt we will need to depend on you a great deal for a great number of these policy considerations, because you live with this every day. And you guys make decisions on this every day. So if there's nothing else, or if you think of something, shoot it to me or Ginger before, and we will make sure we give that strong consideration. Look at the next two, sparsity and teacher salaries. What do we need to give consideration to adding in these two areas? Sparsity, they talk about students per square mile. Federal is 10, but the range is 10 to 25 students. What else do we need to add in this area?
Katie, on instructional salaries, and maybe,
okay,
is it they're asking us, even though I'm trying to increase instructional salaries, are we then saying first we want the teaching, actually certified teachers to be, and I guess I'm looking at K through 12 teachers first. So if I had a pot of money, where would I start? I would start with K through 12 teachers. because you have teacher-like roles that also get paid teacher pay. But then when you're talking about if you had to increase a certain bucket, I would start with just teachers because, there are other people who live in that bucket, like counselors, librarians. And I'm not saying person's job isn't as important as the other person's job, but what I am saying that if I have limited funding, if you're asking for me, asking how do I put it in some type of ranking order. So are they asking us that, or we're just saying, hey, just instructional salaries? I guess that was my way of asking. And if so, I would want to be very clear that teacher salaries to me should be the most important thing that we should be considering. I was going to put that out on the table for.
And I think, and Ginger, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you're working with other subcommittees. Angela, I think that was the question that the steering committee was asking each of the committees. That particular question came from the steering committee. So I think you just done an excellent job of laying out. You said you would start with teacher salaries, K through 12.
I would start there. Then, because you do have other people who get paid under the instructional salaries, and you have your counselors and library. And I'm not saying that we don't need all, but when you're talking about who's in front of children, 80% of the time, it is your classroom teachers who are there in front of students every day, the teaching. Gotcha. So that's why I was calling that out.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hey, this is
Cordell,
Ryan.
Chris? Yeah, Ryan.
Just real quick, I basically wanted to just say I completely agree. Those teachers providing the direct services, I think, is where the priority should be. Also, too, not to take away local control, I think in the funding formula, I think holding the locals' feet to the fire to say what this money's intended for and the priority, it has to be on that priority versus finding some other, avenue in which to spend the money. I know that sounds contrary to local control, and I'm not against local control. I just think if that is a true priority, it should be put into the formula in a way that requires that to a certain degree or incentivizes it.
Right. Other comments, suggestions?
Cato, I'll just add that regarding teacher salaries, of course, included in the formula should be a sufficient amount for teacher salaries, such as potentially, the Southeastern average or something of that nature that has a sufficient amount included in the funding formula for teacher salaries, as well as salaries of other positions. There needs to just be a sufficient amount.
Okay. Other comments, concerns? In fact, if you look at the next page where it says, are there any other policies for teacher salaries that should be included?
Was that talking about like pay for performance and that type of thing? Is that what that's getting at? Okay.
Exactly. Any other areas?
Well, I think it gets a little tricky, or at least it's been expressed to me when you talk about performance-based salaries, just because a lot of people have concerns about the system that measures that.
Yeah.
And I would agree, but I would also offer up as well that if that's a consideration, that you do both. That not only do we look at the achievement, which will capture the majority of some of our districts, but I also think that you have to look at growth. While yes, students may not be on grade level, students, if they're growing, if they're already 4 years behind, right, when I get them, and I can get them 2 years ahead, and each year I add a year, I'm going to get there eventually. So I think that if people are thinking about performance-based, it has to be where I honor those who are moving with achievement, but I also honor those who are moving with growth. And people have different thoughts about it, but to be fair, to make sure that I'm honoring in this teaching profession, because every school doesn't look the same. Every district doesn't look the same, but I believe you can be fair and in the middle around how do you award teachers for the work that they do, right? So I think that's one way of thinking through it.
Okay.
I would add,
Oh.
and I know we've mentioned this in the committee before, but I'm just trying multiple bites at the apple in case it doesn't make it in on its own in terms of cost of living for teacher salaries. So besides looking at increasing the base, like Chris mentioned, being able to look at the cost of living because the teacher cost, salary cost is going to be different in different places based on that. The second thing I'd say is the potential for teacher pathway to teacher career pathways, like leader pathways. So I know that one of the things that we struggled is having opportunities for teachers to get paid more while also staying in the classroom versus moving to administration. And so the ability for teachers to be recognized, for the state formula to recognize the value of having teachers as leaders in school buildings, also in classrooms, I think would be helpful.
Okay. Let me stop right here. Ginger, I know we have thrown a lot at you. Have you been able to capture some of the thoughts that has been articulated by the group thus far?
Yes, let me recap what I have so you all can correct me and then also add in anything that I've missed. So for teacher salaries, we have start with the teacher salaries and then move to teacher-like roles, requiring or incentivizing that those investments are prioritized when those funds move to the local level. Sufficient amount of funding for those teacher salaries, potentially looking at the Southeastern average for teacher salaries as well as other roles, and taking the cost of living into consideration for that. For performance-based pay, it should be both achievement as well as growth, and then funds to recognize teacher leadership pathways within the schools.
Gang, does that capture many of the comments that came from all of us?
I don't know if this is Tyler. I don't know if this fits here or not, but there again, I'm kind of jumping on like what Cordell mentioned, taking multiple shots at this. But, I think it would be important to, in addition to funding, obviously, our educators, but funding positions either within the districts or at the schools who are connecting the students, of which we've identified barriers that they may be experiencing with nonprofits to help them address those issues outside of the walls of the school.
Okay. We will put that in also, because I want to be respectful of your time, and we have a number of other areas to go through. Let's look at the policy on tutoring. Would any of you like to make comment on that? It said this is required for students who score at below on the third grade TCAP beginning school year 23-24. Should there be funding included in the formula for this legally required support? Comments, suggestions?
I mean, if it's legally required, then I would think there should be funding for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. No. Good. We will put that down. Totally agree with you. Okay, the next, CTE. Comments, suggestions on how Tennessee may choose to address the CTE considerations?
Katie, on this one, I think we have to be, and again, I think this is probably around a disclaimer for me.
Okay.
And I'm only talking about from the seat where I sit in every day. That when I think about CCTE teachers, when I think about raising salaries, that's not the issue. Even though salaries are an issue across the state, it is being competitive with what they're making in industry. And I know we might not be able to be competitive because I know I may not be able to pay an engineer $100,000 to come teach children. I wish I could. And I think that's the right move. But what it can't be, it has to be some wiggle room in there. Not only are we talking about salaries, but we're talking about some type of either it's retention or recruitment, because you can just say if my starting salary is 40-some thousand, but then if I have some type of stay on bonus for 3 years at least, so I can see a cohort of students through. I'm just talking about a cohort. And I say if you stay 4 consecutive years, then a bonus would be an additional 40,000. Then it's not in my base salary, but it is in an increase that I would receive every year on the money that I bring home. So, and again, I know base salary can be funny, but just the fact I think that there can be some language or disclaimer about where there might not be increase in base salary, yes, but there has to be recruitment retention for the state of Tennessee if we want people from industry to come teach our students to get them ready for industry. So I just, again, just offer that as a recommendation.
Okay. Other
With-
comments?
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead,
with
please.
CTE, I know we would generally focus on who's teaching the classes, but I also think in CTE, we want a broader perspective of what does that mean to actually fully kind of recognize what's needed to, if we're preparing students for career technical education and even college, which would be also having counselors, so either graduation coaches or counselors who are specifically designated to help students think about post-secondary access and what their post-secondary plan would be. Also, I think internships and apprenticeships, so funding to ensure that students can take advantage of that and have that opportunity. So I think that the additional pieces are what do we want to see as being the end result of a CTE program, and being able to support and fund those additional pieces to having successful post-secondary success for students.
Okay. Junior, were you able to capture those comments by both Angela and Cordell that they laid out? Would you like to read what you have back to them, so if we missed anything, we can make sure we add it?
Yes, I have retention and or recruitment bonuses for CTE teachers who remain in the field rather than leaving for industry. And then funds for career counselors and apprenticeship or internship opportunities.
So
And please don't hesitate to tell me if I've missed something. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So
I would join Cardell and just underscore that. Was in conversation with Beverly Robertson of the Chamber just this week, she and her team, and just the connectivity of not only having these funds, but the strategy of connecting that to employment and employers and segments of the economic field that would be to the betterment of individuals. So, I mean, she talked about STEM and STEAM and how a like city to Memphis. I think Indianapolis, 20,000 students graduating out of STEM. Memphis is 5,700. And so just continuing to focus in this way and be strategic in that as well.
Okay, great point. Ginger, anything else you need that have been laid out to you? Anything else we need to capture?
David, I added your comment just as at the end of the funds for career counselors and apprenticeship internship opportunities, and just added it as and a strategy for connecting students to future workforce. Does that adequately describe what you just shared?
Yeah, I think it's strategic in each community to what is really going to be helpful economically, futuristically, and pathways. So yes.
Okay. Well, let's look at the next three areas, K-12 weight. Then the next two is outcomes. Question from the steering committee: how might you consider K-2 weight or additional investments in the early grades?
Cato,
Yes, please, go ahead.
This is Chris. I'll just go back to the draft framework that that came out. You know, there was something included in it, additional considerations supported by subcommittees. but it references a pre-K through third grade band. This says K2 weight. I think the point is well made in the draft framework where it says a strong push to lower class sizes in the youngest grades to achieve stronger outcomes. Research demonstrates the value of class sizes under 15 students, as well as high dosage tutoring. So I mean, obviously I would be supportive of that in K2 or pre-K through 3, depending upon which grade band is considered.
Okay. So Jenny, I guess we can conclude what's already been laid out in a draft recommendation. Okay, anyone else on that? Why don't we move then, and if you do think of something, let us know. Question from the steering committee. They would like to see outcome options for middle school. What outcomes does your subcommittee recommend? Middle school outcome options. And then the next one is, they would like to see other outcome options for elementary school. What outcomes do your subcommittee recommend? And, you know, I know, Angela, you live with this. I know, Cordell, you have dealt with this. What outcomes would, looking at these two policy areas, give us some ideas of things we should make sure we include?
Especially for middle school youth, the socio-emotional developmental outcomes, I think, are going to be highly important.
Totally agree. Okay.
I think previously I mentioned Algebra 1. I'm sorry, Andrew.
No. I just wanted to go back. We're solving for here for outcomes. I just wanted to make sure before I responded, before I responded to the question.
No, go ahead.
No, what was the area that you called out though, Cato?
Oh, I said on policy outcomes, question from the steering committee, this came from them. They would like to see outcome options for middle school. What outcomes does your subcommittee recommend? And then their next area, they want to see other outcome options for elementary school. What outcomes do your subcommittee recommend? Middle school and elementary. Those two policy areas.
I'll let people respond because I guess I'm still trying to, okay, let me process it and I definitely will listen, but I'm still trying to see because K8, your outcome is really around literacy, math, science, social studies. You can have outcomes on Algebra 1. I heard Cordell, I know he'd be chiming in, but for the most part, you only have a select subgroup of students.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll hear others because maybe I'm missing something.
Okay. Others want to weigh in on this, and this came directly from these two, well, these several came directly from the steering committee, and we're just reading off what they sent back to each of the subcommittees.
Yeah, and Angela, I don't know if this helps at all, but for what's on the draft framework, a lot of those are focused more in the high school area. And so trying to look for, are there other outcomes that we might be able to look at for elementary and middle? As of right now, what's on the draft framework, literacy is listed on there, which would hit outside of high school, but the rest of the ones that are listed on there are for the high school area.
I got it. So I guess that's why I said I want to. So thank you for the clarity. And I'm just trying to process as I'm thinking about middle school students. What else would I pull other than their TCAP data and some summative data? Just thinking. I think you can. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna listen.
The other question I would have is, what would the baseline be? Like, what are we comparing those outcomes to?
Is that in both middle school and elementary, or just in one?
Both. I mean, are we talking about on a aggregate level outcomes, or are we talking individual outcomes for youth, and then what are they comparing it to? Is their baseline just a school year thing, or what? Because in order to kind of determine what the outcomes could be, we need to kind of know what sort of time frame, I guess, we're talking about, like to enact change. Like, how long is it going to actually take to
That's a good point. Okay.
Cato, I apologize if someone else said this and I missed it, but on outcomes, I would hope that it wouldn't just be strictly based upon straight achievement. And I know it was mentioned earlier, but it would be also based on student growth, because students don't come to us all at the same level, of course. And so I would be a strong proponent for student growth in any of these outcomes to be a major factor and not just look at only straight achievement.
Okay. Ginger, does that give you an idea? Could you read back some of the things we have laid out to put in these particular policy areas?
Mm-hmm. So I have, for the K-2-1, I just have the pre-K third grade band and the supports that are defined in the draft framework. For the middle school and for the elementary outcomes, we have for both of those, achievement and growth is what we want focused on there. And then it was mentioned, I think, social emotional development outcomes as potential. I think that was just for middle school though, but correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I think it would be important to look at both, but I know in what we do at Big Brothers Big Sisters, we see that those critical years for socio-emotional development are in the middle school years.
Okay, does that pretty well capture what we would like to see in those areas? Okay, well, let's look at policy, the area of accountability. Question from the steering committee. What accountability measures should be included in any new formula proposal, or what ideas do you have? Accountability measures. Anyone have any ideas, comments, things they would like to add or see added?
Is this referencing accountability to the schools for their practices? Am I understanding that right? Like that they're following these?
Okay. Jenny, when this has come up in the other subcommittees, what were some of the things other subcommittees felt the need to discuss on the accountability piece?
So you guys are my first group that have actually had a conversation about this one. So my other groups did not get to this one yet. But I think this is around like the accountability of the funds, or around, think more about like the accountability, the transparency, those sorts of pieces, versus if you're in the education, like in a school or district, the first place you may go to when you think about accountability is like accountability model, which is not what we're talking about here.
I got you. Okay.
Now I will say this, Ginger, what I will add when I think about accountability. So I always think about, and I guess I'm always in the subject area about the growth and the achievement of just reading, language, arts, math, science, and especially science. If those are the three areas also that they're going to use for our success rate, right? So I always want to make sure that I have the same type of language all the way across. But I'm thinking about accountability, if we're talking about attendance, that can also be pulled out for middle schools as well, because that will have an impact on our chronic absenteeism. And I know that they use that for as one of our areas that they hold against us as well. So just thinking about that. So
are you suggesting putting attendance as one of those middle school outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I've added that one back into that list. Thank you.
Because chronic absenteeism, instead of chronic absenteeism, I would rather get attendance. Then as students' attendance improve, then in many cases, the chronic absenteeism will improve as well.
That's a great point. Thank you. Appreciate you bringing that up.
This could be a slippery one, but evaluating the schools' DEI practices when it comes to hiring and propelling the careers of the staff and teachers within the schools.
Okay. Anyone would like to add anything or comment on the areas that's already been put out there for us?
Cato, this is Ted. I was going to have Ginger clarify. Can you clarify what, again, the accountability? Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so I think this one would be focusing more on when you think about the accountability measures around like the funds themselves, and how those might be used, or anything that you might want to see put in place around that side of, you know, the funding formula. So if we have this formula in place, what kind of accountability measures might you want in place around the formula in those funds?
Thank you.
So just disregard my prior comment.
Okay.
It does seem to be more fund related, money related.
Well, I do think, I mean, kind of what I said, this is Ryan, earlier about, you know, that balance between local control and the formula. I do think there's got to be some parameters put in place that, you know, if X amount is allocated through the formula and confirmed by the legislature for, let's just say, frontline teacher salaries, then the LEA shouldn't be able to say, well, we're going to do whatever we want with this pot of money we just got. The accountability needs to be there that it truly goes for teacher salaries or whatever that thing is. So, and then they have the ability to work within those parameters.
I got you. In other words, you're saying there would not be total discretion, but there would be some discretion.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good point.
The only thing I would call is that presumes that there's a fair baseline, an equitable baseline to start from. And so, as I think we see here clearly, if the teacher salary, and for most of the urban areas, if the teacher salary is above what the standard is, or even what's in rural, what the average is across the state, you know, whether it applies to teacher salaries to get them to a certain point or just because that's what the funding is for, is a question of whether that's valid, or maybe education assistants actually need more because they're not paid, you know, a livable wage. And so I think that balancing piece, if you can assume that there's an equitable piece that we've talked about for salaries across the state, then I agree. Otherwise, I think, you know, some allowance for variability.
Okay. Jen, do you have enough notes on those particular areas?
What I have so far is there should be parameters with some flexibility and allowance for variability, while trying to ensure that we have funds that are actually going toward those resources and roles that have been defined within the formula.
Okay. Gang, did we capture that the way you wanted it? Okay. We have, thank you. We have 10 minutes left, and all of you know that I am a stickler for getting you out on time. So looking at these other areas, reporting, funding year, ADM shifts, maintenance of effort, professional development and training, which of these areas do you feel the need that you would like to weigh in on as it relates to policy consideration?
Cato, I got real happy. If I could just put in my vote, and then I'll tell you why. For PD, for professional development, because if we don't improve teachers, then we won't be able to improve outcomes, right? Yeah. So all of this is connected. And when I think about PD, it's not a one, so most people say, hey, go to PD, a one-time shot, but it is almost like a year-long process of going to classes and doing all those things. So to me, when I think about well spent, once I get teachers hired, then I got to develop them. The only way I can develop them is to have funded, and it can't be a one-time shop. And again, it connects back to, and then if I had to put my priority in here, there are two places, and I'm using my own experience, where we're focusing. It would have to be on my early end, pre-K through 2, and then it would have to be on the high school end. So we're trying to do high school and pre-K through 2 so we can kind of bag it back to help meet people. So if I don't say anything else today, professional development is the one I want to call out. for that would be my next big thing where I would want to see the investment go for BP.
Okay, well said.
You know, this is Ryan. Can I just add to what Angela said? I completely agree with all of it, but I think also the emotional support that our teachers and staff across the state need too. I think is a portion of that professional development as well, making sure that they're supported emotionally as their cup has kind of ran all the way out over these last couple years in particular.
Ryan, well said.
And this is Chris. I'll agree with both, and just point out. I think I pointed out previously that the current funding formula doesn't have anything at all in it for professional development and training for teachers, and so
Okay.
I would hope that any new funding formula would have something for professional development for teachers. I know we've looked at it previously in the BEP review committee, and I believe Georgia has some kind of component in their funding formula for professional development. So that may be somewhere we could look to see what they're doing to provide that funding in their formula.
Excellent points from all of you. Ginger, were you able to capture those comments?
Yes, I've captured first. This is a vital component. Everyone is very passionate about this one. This one might be the one that I've heard the most energy about so far. Professional development is a year-long ongoing process, and it's crucial. Priority for pre-K and high school, and then school staff need that emotional support as well as the professional development supports.
You captured that quite well. Good job. Okay, what else? Would any of you like to weigh in on any of these? Now with our 6 minutes left, you've done a tremendous job. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Cato. I mean, I have a question because for the experts on the call, I've been hearing some rumblings about maintenance of effort and potentially having more of a burden on the local district. At least one of my representative colleagues said he heard that rumor today. And so I don't know if that's something, I saw it on the list. I don't know if that's something that needs to be addressed in the funding formula, because I know there's a fear that if the state gives more, then the locals will give less and you'll end up with the same amount. But to the experts on the call, I mean, do you feel like this is something that needs to be addressed?
That's a great point.
I'll jump in and say I think maintenance of effort is very important. I think a current deficiency with the maintenance of effort is that it can stay stagnant from year to year to year as far as local contribution goes. Even though school districts have increased costs every year for things such as increased student enrollment or salary increases or other kinds of things. And I would like to see some kind of inflationary factor or something on maintenance of effort to take that into consideration, similar to what is done for higher education. Higher education does have an inflationary factor and on their maintenance of effort. And I would like to see something like that with ours. But I think maintenance of effort has been sort of a savior for many a school district over the years, where the local funding body can't just arbitrarily and unilaterally decide.
Jerry, now since I know the funeral is going to be Friday, I may not. Hold on.
Well, you know what?
Y'all heard about the funeral. I was talking about we have a funeral we got to go to Friday, so I apologize.
All right, we understand. Senator, does that help what was mentioned there on the maintenance of effort issue?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can I also mention on that topic, because I think this is an issue of the consideration between local ability at the district level or the county level, because if we're looking at equity, there might be some areas that have more local ability to pay if it was considered on a district level. And so I think that's a different consideration, whether we should shy away from their potentially paying more on a local level, considering that right now that inequity is baked into state law, because municipality, like for us, our municipal districts, according to state law, have to give an additional, like some amount of portion to their schools, but it's not taken away from what they get from the local funding. So they are baked into the formula or the state law is them getting additional funding from the municipality plus the money they're getting from the local county. And that might shift if the state formula shifted for local ability to pay to include that local portion, that local municipality portion, if it's in addition to what the county is contributing, which is not an equitable formula for county and local funding.
Ginger, were you able to capture the two major comments that is on the maintenance of effort issue?
I have the first part of it. The second part of it, I'm pretty sure I have not done a great job of capturing that one. So Cardell, I'm going to need you to help me on that part. So let me
That was just
share
more
with you what I have so far.
Yeah, that was just more information for Ramesh. I think it'll be covered in the local versus county or district versus county consideration. That's fine.
Okay. So I have maintenance of effort is a super important piece to be considered. It should have an inflationary factor similar to higher education. And then we need to make sure that we examine that local ability to pay to ensure that local county funding piece. And that's where I dropped off. So that's where I was needing your help with that part.
The only part is equity. That's all it means is state, local, and district equity in terms of funding our students with the highest needs and being fair. The only other addition I would add, Ginger, is if we think about financial reporting, the ability to show financial reporting comparing similar districts in terms of especially socioeconomic levels, because I think a lot of times we see just the comparisons of districts and how much they're spending or their financial formula. And so you compare, Williamson County or Lakeland District to Shelby County Schools and say, well, Shelby County Schools spending $12,000 per child and Lakeland is spending $9,000. It gives an imbalance of what the need is and what the funding is going towards. So for the state, being able to compare like districts to get a real clear contextual picture.
Well, Cardia, are you talking about like districts in the state? Because I think what I would want to know, not only like districts in the state, but other like districts that also other like states that have large urban districts, because I think that we need to see their base for spending, because a lot of times it may not even be it may be the percentage that the state is spending on education, right? Because again, I think about what our state is allocating for education compared to some other states. Then I think that if we get the state funding, right, then you can, comparing states, but also comparing Shelby County Schools to another large urban school, but it comes back to the state level of how much the funding is allocated for education in total sum, right? So I think I would want to know that in the analysis. Because to your point, I don't want to be compared to another school district in Tennessee that may not look like me or may not have some of the same issues. But I think that I would also be more comfortable in being compared to a CPS, right? To a Detroit, to an Indiana. But even with that, even if you're going to compare me, then tell me what the state is spending on education, because that says a lot about where our interest is. And that would be, again, just something that I think about, I'm thinking through.
Okay. Team, I want to thank you for your input. I am going to do the chairman's prerogative and say you have been a tremendous group. You've given us time and your attention. And if you think of anything else, shoot me or Ginger a note and we'll make sure we get your comments in. But I really want to thank all of you for working so hard with us on this. I know you have other things to do. I appreciate your support for me as chair and the amount of money you're being paid for this. I promise you we will make sure you get a raise as soon as I get mine. Ginger, thank you for being with us today. Thank Dominique for all of her help that she gave us throughout this process. And Ginger, is there anything else that we missed today?
Nothing you guys missed, but I definitely want to say on behalf of myself and Dominique, thank you all so much for your input, your contributions, and certainly your time. I know you all had a lot of things to do in between meetings and then also engaging in these meetings. So thank you, each and every one of you, for your contributions. And I've enjoyed getting to hang out with you guys today. So thank you.
Ginger, thank you. And thank all of you. I have also enjoyed getting to hang out with you for the last several weeks. Have a good rest of your week and be safe out there, my friends.
Take care. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.